Okay, so good morning, everybody. It's Dr. Karen, and today I wanted to talk about why and how your language therapy sessions can be extremely effective, even if you're doing online therapy. So, as I'm recording this video, we are in the middle of a pandemic, so we're on lockdown, we're all quarantined, which means that SLPs are doing therapy online. And so I've had a lot of questions about just general logistics and legal issues with teletherapy platforms. So I do have some great content on my blog, and actually also in my paid programs in Language Therapy Advanced, we actually did a special teletherapy Q&A for those nuts and bolts things like how to figure out a platform and how to stay legally compliant. But I've also been getting some other questions about therapy techniques. So aside, once you get everything figured out as far as your tech and your legal compliance, okay, then what? How do you make sure that your language therapy is effective? And so the first thing I want you to realize is that actually a lot of the things that were effective when you were doing in-person therapy, it's actually pretty easy to translate a lot of those to online therapy if you've got the right systems in place. Because a lot of us are, you get used to your routines when you're in person, you get used to your games that you use, your flashcards, your things that you use that put things in front of students, allow them to manipulate things, activities like that. And it's easy to get used to our normal routine. And if we've all of a sudden got to switch to online therapy, whether it's because of the pandemic or if it's because you've decided to take a new job where you are doing online therapy, it does take a little bit of a paradigm shift. But I assure you that a lot of those things that you were doing or a lot of those skills that you were working on in person can be addressed effectively, if not more effectively, via online therapy if you've got the right systems in place. And so this is why when I mentor SLPs in my programs, especially Language Therapy Advanced, which is my most comprehensive course for SLPs, what I teach people to do is understand the systems and the skills and really just have a set of go-to strategies that they use to target the primary things that cause those language processing issues in the first place. So things like phonology, orthography, morphology, semantics, and syntax that all affect your students' vocabulary development and their ability to read and spell and write and just process language. So when you have a set of go-to strategies that enable you to do that, it's actually pretty easy to tailor them to even just an in-person session or an online session. I've actually got a handful of SLPs that have been in the program for a couple of years that already were in positions where they were doing teletherapy, and they were able to easily use the materials, use these strategies that I've taught to effectively do an online session. So the key is you want to think about in your head, and the goal is, how could I, if I just had a pencil and paper, how could I do an effective therapy session? So if you learn how to do that, and if you learn how to, and when I would do a lot of the techniques that I teach, I would often just use a whiteboard. And the way that I was able to do that is that I was keeping it simple. But when you have that mindset of how could I do a session if I literally just had a pencil and paper, if you know the right processes and you know the right skills to target, and you get good at pulling probes, like pulling vocabulary probes and having in-depth discussions with your students and being really creative, it's actually pretty easy to do a session with just a dry erase board and some markers. And you are looking at different words. If you've got the right words, you can be pulling the words apart, defining them, describing them. You could be pulling pictures from online and discussing them and discussing words and writing sentences about them, writing stories about them, drawing pictures, things like that. All things that you could do. I know I mentioned pictures. Technically, that's another material, but that's something you could do online as well. But keeping it pretty simple and getting used to going through these set protocols without a lot of stuff is the key to making this work. And if you know how to do that, it doesn't really matter if you're online or in person, because you could easily replicate that online with a Google document. What I've recommended, I know that a lot of people have teletherapy platforms where you can pull up your screen and draw on your screen. And sometimes you can give your students remote access where they can actually be in your computer manipulating things. But you actually don't necessarily need that feature. It's nice to have, but you don't need it to have an effective session. What I have told people is that if you just have a screen share in the platform that you're using, what you could do is just create a Google Doc and then share that link with them. Again, you want to go into your sharing settings and make sure that they have the capabilities to edit. And what you can do is just help them to just have everybody manipulating that document at once. Because if I have the link to a Google document and I'm on it, and then I have a student who also has that link and I've given them editing capabilities, then they're going to be able to go in and edit that in real time. So you could all be editing that document, having discussions, contributing. They could be writing their sentences. You could be pulling words apart and discussing it, showing them different morphemes in words, things like that. You could be discussing the semantic features of words and then taking notes on that document as you are working through it. Lots of things. Let me just do this really quickly, just so you guys know what I'm talking about when I say sharing capabilities. I went through this in one of my member calls, but I'll do it really quickly here as well. Let me just find a document. Okay. Just create a Google Doc here. So this is how you do it. I'm going to share my screen really quickly. Okay, so what I'm saying is that I know that hold on, let me turn off my camera really quickly because I know that my head is probably covering the spot that you want to see. Okay, there we go. So you're going to go up to the top right corner and you're going to click share. And then, okay, and it says get shareable link. So you can share this with people specifically and give them access to it. But what I recommend doing for your students is that you don't need to enter their email addresses. You're just going to get a shareable link and you're going to copy that link. And then you're going to make sure that, this is on. Anyone with link can edit. So if you want your students to be able to edit it in real time, what you can do is click can edit, copy link, and then send them that link. And then everybody who has that link that you just shared can go in here and make changes. So if your student had this document up on their computer, you'd see another little cursor with their name on it, and they'd be able to edit it too. So that's a super easy way that you could take that whole concept of pencil and paper to the therapy room. Okay, hold on. All right, now let me turn my video back on. All right. So again, keep it simple in teletherapy, and you'll still be able to have an effective session. It just takes some time to get used to, but that is a quick tip that you can do just to get up and running. And remember, if you've got the right systems and strategies, it doesn't really matter if you're in person or not. And I'm not making light of this situation. I'm just saying, just don't assume that because you're doing something a little bit differently or that goes outside of what's your standard routine, that it can't be effective. A lot of times we are going to be pleasantly surprised at what we're able to do when we have some limitations imposed on us. A lot of times it gives us the opportunity to learn some new skills and find that there are other ways of doing things that are just as effective, if not even more effective. So with that being said, I've mentioned a lot of times today that when you have the right systems, this is pretty easy to do, and you actually don't need a lot of stuff to do an effective session. So I teach therapists how to do that in my course, Language Therapy Advanced Foundations. So if you are interested in learning about that program, learning about the framework that I teach, you can hop on my free webinar. It's called the 5-Component System to 10x Your Language Therapy Treatment Outcomes. So on this presentation, I'm going to be walking through some of the top mistakes that we make when we're treating language processing issues. And this isn't like, I gotcha, you're doing this wrong. This is a, hey, you know what? There's an easier way of doing things. A lot of people get extremely big aha moments when they realize that, because they realize that they are actually making things more difficult than they need to, and that they can be much more effective if they just cut down some of the things that they were doing. This is all about narrowing your focus so that you are working on the essential skills, not trying to do everything. A lot of us are not being effective, not because we aren't good therapists or because we're not doing enough. A lot of times it's because we're trying to do everything, and we're trying to do everything well, and we're spreading ourselves really thin. So you're going to find, as you watch the presentation, that you can actually get much better results when you laser focus on fewer things, if those are the right things. So that is the key in those first steps of figuring out what your go-to strategies are going to be. So I talk about the framework and why it works. So how do we figure out what skills are highest priority in language therapy? Well, we've got to figure out the root cause of those processing issues in the first place. And then what we can do is figure out, okay, now that we figured out what skills are the root cause, what skills do we want to target in therapy? And what that's going to do for you is going to start creating a framework that's going to give you a system. So a set of go-to strategies that you can cycle through so that you're not second guessing yourself and wondering, what am I doing in therapy, spending hours digging through materials. It's crystal clear what you should be doing next. And that way, if you want to use apps and games and things just to spice things up a little bit, you can, but you don't need to. You can keep your students engaged and learning with just a simple dry erase board, pencil and paper, Google Doc, whatever it is you have available to you. You can still make that work for you and still keep your students interested and engaged and motivated, and keep yourself feeling all of those things in the process. So I'd love to share this with you on my free online presentation. Again, it's called the 5-component framework for 10xing your language therapy outcomes. To get access to this training, if you're watching this on Facebook, I will share a link in the comments below. Same if you're watching this on YouTube or my blog, there'll be a link below. But if you're watching this on my Facebook page or Instagram, just send me a direct message to my Facebook account at Dr. Karen Speech and Language. Send me a direct message and say 5-component training, and I will share that training registration link with you so you can learn that language therapy system that's going to help you get better results with less effort. Thanks so much, everybody, for listening, and have a wonderful day.